damn you.
On the inside.
Without sin, he could not put his holiness on display. Without sin, he could not put his wrath on display. And he has done so for his own glory.
Foreclose that
he's going to have elect infants, and then there are others who will not be.
And when he wants to, he orders those to commit adultery when he wants to.
When a person experiences false teaching, they might have a sense that something is wrong, but they really aren't sure what it is.
Whose baby is this? Grandma, she's my very own Geneva baby. Doomed from the womb with real sulfur and brimstone smell.
we now continue with
Has God predetermined all our besetting sins?
Yes.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Idol killer! Idol killer! Idol killer!
For the time has come that judgment must begin at the house of God.
And you should not judge a man by his 1 weak moment. You need to look at the whole body of his work. And don't judge him on one hiccup that happens.
Sacred cows obliterated.
Pre-programmed to believe lies.
False gods desecrated.
That's a viper in a diaper.
I forgot to add me again. What is going on? I'm getting up there in my old age. Hello and welcome to Idol Killer, a ministry dedicated to destroying sacred cows for the cause of Christ. I'm your host, Warren McGrew, and thank you for joining me. I have a very special guest, ladies and gentlemen. It's none other than my dear baby brother. He's not a baby anymore. The guy's got wife and 2 kids? You're all grown up, man. What happened?
Yeah, years have passed. Years have passed. Many moons.
This is my brother Brian. We were having a conversation. I think it was Monday, and we were talking about just God and philosophy and all sorts of things, traditions, and your studies and mine. And I said this would be a fun conversation. I need to bring you on Idol Killer, and I begged and pleaded, and you finally agreed to come on. And then I talked to our mom, and I told her she has to stay up until 8 o'clock her time so that she can at least say hello in the side chat. And I don't see her I think she went to bed, Brian.
That's okay. She's probably holding out for her favorite.
That's true. That's true. But yeah, this is my brother Brian, and Yes, we are.
There she is. She is here. Wow.
Oh, hey, there she is. Everybody say hello to my mom. All right, she made it. You can go to sleep now, Mom.
I should probably just go ahead and apologize.
That's right.
Sorry for what we're about to talk about.
Oh, man. Do we look a lot alike, Brian? When I was a younger guy, we would go to restaurants and people would ask us all the time if we were twins. And I know that bothered you because I'm 9 years your senior, and I loved it. But that hasn't happened in a while. I think I've let myself go, and it hasn't been good to me. Time, that is.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think we still get told we look alike. We're not able to hang out as much now with your kids, and I've got 2 kids, so it's just life is caught up with us, and we're only able to see each other a couple times during the year and holidays. So that would probably be me.
Paul wants to know who the evil twin is.
That would definitely be me.
Oh man, I need to bring Mom on. I don't know if she'd ever go for that, but I need to bring her on one day, and we need to talk.
Yeah, I'm the totally depraved one.
You're the totally depraved one. You were born that way, right? You're the one that was born. You're the Esau to Jacob. Is that it?
Yeah, which actually it's kind of funny because I was listening to that podcast, Lord of the Spirits, I was telling you about.
Yeah,
they were actually talking about how that is pretty much twisted on our understanding. That it's actually the same word as when Jesus is talking about how you should hate your parents and hate your siblings compared to your love of God. And it wasn't a hate; it was more of a love less than. And so they actually were talking about how Esau was still under the Abraham blessings and was still blessed all the way up into the point where when the Edomites rejected their calling as a co-heir of the Abraham promises, and whenever the northern tribe was taken, that's when the blessings were removed.
No, you're right. Yeah, the whole hated Jacob I've loved, Esau have I hated. It's in the same context as Christ saying, unless a man hate his mother and father. It basically means to esteem less.
Yeah.
Or such that you love me so much that by comparison your love for another thing could be called hate because you love me so much more.
Yeah.
That's all that means. It's just an order of priority. But I think actually we were discussing Lord of the Spirits. They mentioned Leighton Flowers, and you told me, and I reached out to Leighton. I go, "Hey, you're being mentioned," and he's like, "I like what they said. I just don't like what they said about me in this episode." He's like, "But I commented and told them I appreciate their work." You know,
they call him a very handsome man, so
pretty well. He handles it much better than I do.
Yeah, they said he was a very handsome man, and I think they probably strawmanned it a little bit, but I think they did their best.
Yeah, I've met Leighton in person. He is a handsome man. He's holding up well. Yep, he's about a good, I think, 4 or 5 feet taller than me. I think he's a Nephilim. Yeah, we got a picture of us standing side by side, but it looks like I'm on my knees because he's so much taller than me.
Oh, dude, and you're the tallest of all the siblings.
Yeah, I'm 6'3", and I think Leighton is actually like 6'5" or 6'6". But man, does like when I'm standing next to him, I feel short. Like it bothers me. Like I don't ever feel short unless I'm with someone that's like that much taller than me, and then I notice it. But yeah. Oh, when Deep calls, Amber said she met Leighton over cigars and bourbon. Yeah, you're a bad influence. You're a bad influence, Amber. Oh wow, I didn't realize that. 6'2". Yeah. So anyway, so this program is going to be somewhat of a chill stream, I think is what we call it. So if you were tuning in for something as exciting as the Paul versus Tyson fight, what a letdown that was. This will probably be more exciting than that, but it's not going to be our usual fare where we're doing it like a debate response or a review or a criticism. We're not going to be talking much about Steve Lawson, I don't think, tonight. We're not going to be picking on James White too much or the usual suspects. Well, you know, Sam, we talked about a shirts versus skins just so people could tell us apart. But we were afraid that no matter which way we went there, that the viewership would decrease. So we decided not to do that. Yeah. But yeah, so Brian, I brought you on to talk. So what do you? I'm going to put it all on you.
Put it all on me.
No, what were we talking about that I said was going to be such a great conversation for our audience? We're talking about
who's
the
Lieutenant
role
Riker. I don't know who that is. Who's Lieutenant Riker?
Oh, that was in Star Trek Next Generation. He was number 1.
Well, we were talking about, and we'll go back to that. Sorry, I'll move it to private chat so I don't see it. We were talking about
a little distracting. It can be.
Yeah. We're talking about Lord of the Spirits, their podcast that I felt like really gave a new set of lens to just kind of analyzing where we are in our worldview. And so they did a Modernism 101 probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. That really kind of helped define, we keep hearing these terms, modernism and postmodernism, how they helped define it was kind of a structuralism based upon more of the Enlightenment principles, which was more of scientific method, equality, versus the kind of the postmodern or post-structuralism, where there is no truth or there's infinite truths. And so just kind of the chaos that has brought into especially the Christian church. And so seeing how it feels like at least the older baby boomers and the generation before them were more modernist and very much about the facts, trying to prove the Bible in a scientific way, which anybody who knows, whenever you're investigating history, there's no way to go back 7,000 years and do a mathematical equation to figure out, hey, there was 5,000 people there, 7,000 people there. You kind of get kind of ballparks. You don't really get accurate information. You kind of have to rely on maybe tradition, word of mouth, and maybe a couple little facts. So that versus kind of the postmodernism that came with younger baby boomers and the kind of millennials and Gen X. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing it really in millennials and Gen Z, where it's all about your experience and all about whatever you feel like God is calling you to. And so there's a complete abandonment for traditional norms, and abandonment for, I guess, the ancient wisdom that we would call upon. So it's really weird that has kind of taken off in some of the churches, but you're seeing that they reject a lot of foundational truths where the diversity, the equity, the inclusion, the thanks for putting that up.
Sorry, I didn't mean to distract you. I thought that was pretty funny.
But yeah, just they're going on a slippery slope that is denying some of the traditions where they're like, oh, well, God didn't really mean that, which kind of opens up the door, and not trying to say it's like for like, but more of the fact that it's kind of what the serpent did in the garden, which was like, did God really say X? Did God really say this? And so it's opening even more doors to where if they continue on this path, it's going to be a nihilism, or some people call it a post-Christian society. But the problem is that our whole society is built upon our understanding of Christianity. And so we're taking out pillars there and hoping that the temple doesn't crash on us.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you're talking about like everything is somewhat experience driven. Like, I feel like the Lord's telling me this, and there needs to be some sort of experiential element to your spiritual walk. But it seems like in many areas it's been so divorced of like a biblical grounding and even a traditional grounding that it's really meaningless. It's just personal preference, so you have people that are coming in and they're saying, oh, I feel like the Lord is leading me to, commit this great big sin, or I feel like the Lord is leading me to, do this horrendous thing. And there's not any sort of church structure or societal norms to say, hey, let's stop and call attention to this. And yet, if you look at the East, it's largely, I don't want to say largely, but there's a large amount of mysticism within that movement and experientialism, and yet it's not divorced from tradition. Mm-hmm. It's not grounded from that. And it seems like in the West we've got these extremes where it's all intellectual assent, or it's just personal preference. And it seems like over here we're dealing with extremes on a pendulum. And I know no group is free of error, but it's something that I was actually contemplating when we were having our conversation about that.
Yeah, and I think the perfect example of someone wants to see that was the Jordan Peterson and Richard Dawkins interview that they did. And I can't remember the gentleman's channel. I think his name's Alex who interviewed him. But the conversation...
Alex O'Connor, the young atheist.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Dawkins was like only wanting to talk about facts, like, hey, how can you prove the virgin birth? How can you prove the resurrection? Which is an impossible question. because it's going back thousands of years now to go try to prove something scientific. It's impossible to repeat that study, even in that worldview. But Peterson was bringing up the whole idea of what we called about the kind of the pyramid of order, the hierarchies, of the fact that our whole structure is built upon the fact that the Christian story is true, that the fact that the resurrection is true, the fact that the virgin birth is true. And so whether it's scientifically, factually proven true or not doesn't really impact what has actually happened in it. The fact that our whole understanding of how we interact, our political systems, however messed up they are, is still based upon some sort of sacrifice, some sort of understanding that forgiveness is possible, but yet justice is required, that that there was a change in society, and how we even measure the year 2024 is all based upon some sort of Christian idea. So you can't even tell the time of when you exist without it.
Yeah, and I've noticed. I don't know if you were aware of this or not, but there was a pretty well-known, outspoken atheist that was in the Dawkins camp, and she came out and said that for all intents and purposes, she was a Christian. And then Dawkins even came out recently, and while he's refusing to let go of his atheism, he says he much prefers a Christian society. So he's a Christian cultural type of atheist, and that's the move where he's gone. So you see that radical new atheism has realized, we may have overcorrected. We may have been too strong in our calls to tear down, this Christian system, this Christian worldview, this Christian ethic. We don't like what we're seeing. This is getting dangerous. We need to reel back a little bit. So even I think that sort of atheist is saying, okay, even if the core facts of Christianity are false, let's say the incarnation, death, burial, resurrection of Christ, they reject that. They're still saying all of the moralistic teachings, all of the wisdom, all of the life lessons that the Bible contains are still relevant, impactful, guiding, and we probably should not get away from that, even as a secular society. So it is interesting to see that move, but I wonder if it's too little, too late. With the impact that they've had on a lot of young atheists and the way that people kind of view atheism. Even, I mean, when you get into the internet, there's some really awful views. Some of my viewers are well aware of that because they watch me. But when you get on the internet, there's some really wild claims and beliefs, and anybody can say anything. And if you have a web camera, there's nothing stopping you from speaking. It doesn't matter, how much of an expert or how well studied or, whether or not you even believe your own claims. I was watching a documentary yesterday. There's a for everybody tuning in, Kurt Jarris and I've had him on the channel talking about semi-Pelagianism, but he runs the channel Veracity Hill. Everybody should go check that out. He's got a documentary coming out soon. I got to watch the screener copy of it, and it's very eye-opening. But it's a case study on what happens when someone leaves the faith and why. It's very fascinating. But you see, like, well, what happens if you reject these moral truths? What happens if you reject these what was the term that he used? I don't want to say pillars. That wasn't what he used, but that I think that evokes the same sort of imagery. You're basically tearing down this foundation, and what's left. I think if I were to, I tend to think that I'm an optimist in practice, but I'm a pessimist as well. Like I battle back and forth between that. So I always say, "Oh, it sucks now, but it's going to get better." That's kind of my view. But I think if I were to abandon any sort of Christian worldview, I think I might find myself inclined towards more of a nihilistic, everything is meaningless. I don't know how I could sustain any sort of optimism. It would be more of like a fleeting, subjective sort of standard, where I would try and find joy in my children, or I would try and find some sort of fulfillment in, the immediate, with Thanksgiving coming up, I would find joy in some pecan pie, but you go, well, what is there's no transcendent value. There's no higher purpose. There's no higher truth, no higher calling. And, gosh, that seems to be such a horrendous view, especially, if it turned out to be true. It'd be so depressing.
And I think you're seeing that the fact that the nihilism, I feel like, has all but ended. And now it's back to a paganism. And
now,
so
but paganism, would you say, like, paganism, like, what would you define that as including hedonism, or how would you break that out?
Yeah, I mean, like, if you've read a little bit about the Greek and Roman gods and goddesses, whatever those things you want to say are, either their modes of being, spirits, demons, whatever you want to call it, those are back to being worshipped with different names. But just like when the Romans renamed all the Greeks gods, it's very similar. I mean, I think the perfect example would just be the French Olympic opening ceremony was right out of old pagan like lore and worship of a feast of, I want to say Aphrodite, but that's probably wrong. Dionysus, that's it. And so just that was my wife, if anybody wanted to know. She knows it better than me. And so just a reenactment of that paganism, I think that's what you're seeing, and that's where you're getting more of the, whatever you want to call it, confusion, or just the oddity stuff of kids wanting to be animals at school, or the hedonism, whatever you want to call that. All that's going back to paganism, because somewhere they opened up Pandora's box and they can't put it back together. And I think part of that starts with the Reformation. And I think we've talked about that, is the fact that the Reformation got rid of a lot of tradition that was needed in the guardrails, which then eventually led to part of the Enlightenment. No, you're good. Part of the Enlightenment, which was that you can become your own God and you can become reason itself, and you'll base all your decisions upon reason, even though you don't understand half the stuff you do, or you can control half the stuff you do, or that happens to you. And then now we're getting this post-reason, post-modernism, post-structuralism, whatever you want to call it, which is just you are your own God and you determine your own values, and it ends up just in a weird paganism ritual.
It's interesting that you linked that to the Reformation. I mean, I've not been too shy with my criticism of Reformed theology and my own journey out of Calvinism. And, there's about, almost 9 years, I think, between us. So our experiences are significantly different. We didn't have like the same home to grow up in, because I was pretty much out of the house by the time, you were even just a young kid. And so we've had completely different experiences. But I grew up in that Calvinist home that mom and dad had, and I've come out of that, my own studies, and I'm rather critical of Reformed theology, and I've been trying to be a good steward, use my God-given faculties and the opportunities that He's given me. I've got a amazing set of tools now online with the Greek and the Hebrew and the various translations and the interlinear and access to the church fathers and all of these resources. And I want to make sure that I'm exegeting scripture and I'm not eisegeting my traditions into it. But I've been trying to find something that is grounded, something that is historically sound, but above all, something that's true. And, it's funny that Paul says that. I mean, I'm not 100% on board with orthodoxy yet, Paul, but I'm very, very receptive to it. To be frank, I don't know if I'll end up in the Orthodox camp or if I'll end up maybe in a Anabaptist view. I love both groups, and they've got some different views on some topics, and so I'm studying that. But I mean, I've attended even with Father Panagiotis's church. I've gone up there and attended some of their workshops and stuff, and talked to them about it. But I don't want to conform to anything other than Christ. That's my chief goal. It's nice to be affirmed by a group, that's very attractive. It's one of the things that almost kept me in Calvinism. And then since I left, everybody's like, oh, you need to come over here, you need to come over there. And I've been really careful to say, I'm not conforming to anything but Christ. But, along that journey, I have encountered some things that have really caused me to stop and go, well, wait a minute, like if I'm going to hitch my wagon to a particular church tradition, I love the Anabaptist movement. I love a lot of their beliefs. Their anthropology is largely anti-Augustinian, so I'm on board with that. I think they're largely non-Anselmian, at least historically, so they're not going to be affirming PSA. Same thing is true with the Eastern Orthodox. But I'm trying to find something that is meaningful, that is true, that's historical, something that I can grab hold of, something that is as tangible as it can be. And it's been rather difficult. But growing up, I always thought the church began with John Calvin, and the Pope was always evil, and that Roman Catholicism's the Roman Catholic Church was the Antichrist and the false prophet, and if you're a Roman Catholic, you're not saved. I mean, those were the kind of views that I had grown up. But I also thought Arminians weren't Christians, and it was pretty radical. And then as I started studying, I saw, well, there's a lot of truth in Roman Catholicism, but there's still enough error there that derives from Augustinianism and some issues there that I can't get on board with. And then I discovered Orthodoxy, and I go, oh, this is actually rather beautiful. Then I discovered Anabaptist, and I go, there's some beauty here too. But I do see a lot of problems flowing from that Reformation. I mean, you have Martin Luther coming in, wanting to rip entire books out of the Bible. You have him teaching some just horrendously awful, evil ideas. Being an Augustinian monk, he was in favor of, righteous persecution, slaughtering peasants, slaughtering the Jews, an anti-Semite, just a nasty individual. And then you get to John Calvin, who has, men, women, children tortured and starved and maimed and executed. And, it's like if you dissent from him, you're in for trouble. If you don't make enough of his church services, you're in for serious, penalties. And he's just a tyrant. And they're trying to enforce their beliefs at the point of the sword. And I don't think that that's ever what Christ intended for the spread of the kingdom to be, was at the point of a sword, convert or die. I think the message of Christ was convert and live. That you're already headed to the grave, 60 seconds a minute. And he came to give us this abundant life. And it seems like the Reformation was all about convert or die. And, they're over there burning and drowning and flaying and stabbing and ripping apart. And it's just the violence of the Reformation. And then you go to church on Reformation Sunday, and they're extolling the virtues of the Reformation and these men, and they're quoting them and shining them in this light that is entirely a caricature that heightens any sort of virtue that they had and completely omits the just horrendous evil that they committed. And it seems like we've lost something in the process of that. And that's deeply concerning to me. And it's interesting that you touched on that as well. But I've talked enough. I'll hand the microphone back over to you.
No, I mean, I think there is something there with the Orthodox. I mean, I've been going probably once a month, and then I've gone to that intro to Orthodoxy. There's something there that's completely foreign to what we've kind of grown up and experienced. I described it kind of like going to a distant cousin's wedding, where it was all about the Eucharist or communion, and very much everything was planned out and focused on the call to repent and to partake in what we would call as sanctification or deification, or basically becoming more and more like Christ and trying to decrease. So their whole liturgy, which, if I remember correctly, is around like 350 AD, is all based upon trying to imitate Christ as much as possible. Now, there's questions I have about like one-offs or whatnot, but there is something there that not only aesthetically that calls for beauty, but also even able to follow along in their liturgy is very, I mean, I don't know how you wouldn't say it and glorify God unless you just think that what they're doing is completely satanic. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I've attended a few, and the liturgy is mostly that of John Chrysostom, and it kind of follows that. And I mean, every time, I'm not kidding, every time I'm studying a passage and I go, oh, I think it means this. This is the way I'm understanding it after a textual analysis. I'm reading the grammar and the words and the context, immediate and broader. And I think this is what it's saying. And I'll go look up some church fathers quotes, and I find Chrysostom, and he's like, yeah, that's what it means. I'm just like, is that confirmation bias? I hope not. But I just go, oh man, he and we think a whole lot alike. I like old Golden Mouth. You know, Chrysostom was pretty smart dude, and I tend to really align a lot with the Cappadocians. Oh, hey, wait a minute!
You got a super chat,
man. Our first super chat. This is Kingdom in Context. Thank you so much for that, buddy. Help me reconcile Orthodox canons from 3rd century. Oh, you used the CE, you rascal. Oh man, you're the problem. You're the problem, Sean. But anyway, help me reconcile Orthodox canons from the 3rd century that contradict apostles' teachings and even 2nd century teachings from Polycarp and Irenaeus. Do men have the authority to change what it means to walk orderly? I think you'd have to give me a canon that actually is contradicting their teachings. Give me some examples on that, and then I think I could speak to it more. Because right now I'm not exactly sure what you're referencing there. I wish I had a better answer. I mean, that's a $50 question. Put your follow-up in the side chat for free, and then I'll keep an eye out for it, and I'll try to get you an answer on that.
I mean, there was we talked about briefly. Ignatius was talking about, he wrote a letter to John the Apostle. He wanted to go to Jerusalem to see Mary and the other saints, the men and women. And his whole thing is why he wanted to go to Jerusalem was he wanted to see James, who in the Bible is called the brother of Jesus. And he says in that letter that he looks, from what everybody says, identical to Jesus. So if you're looking at James, you're basically seeing Jesus. And so that's kind of why he wanted to go there, because he had never apparently seen him. Although I think there might be tradition that he might have been the young boy or babe that was held up by Jesus. But I know Orthodox tradition is that Mary didn't have any other kids, and that the kids that are referred to as the brothers of Jesus are actually Joseph's kids from a previous marriage. Mm-hmm. But again, now I'm way outside my expertise on it. So.
Yeah, I think what you end up with is competing views on an event, and I don't see either one of them being salvific.
No.
So maybe it's my Western eyes where I just go, I mean, I go, okay, if Mary was a perpetual virgin, this is my objection as just a guy speaking. It seems to be concerning if you're approaching it from an Augustinian anthropology because you have a low view of sex, and you're basically denigrating the sacrament of marriage. So I have a major problem if your appeal to the perpetual virginity of Mary is because of a low view of sex within marriage or a low view of the marital sacrament. That is very troubling to me. And I think that's where Rome goes. The East, however, their explanation for why they affirm the perpetual virginity, from what I've heard, is that it's because of their tradition that she was basically almost like a nun at the temple that had already been given over to the temple and pledged this pledge of virginity just to stay unmarried and serve in the temple. And when the angel came to her and she conceived under the Holy Spirit, that they then sought out someone to take care of her outside the temple, found Joseph, who was a widower, who already had these children, and they married. And so that's kind of the view of the perpetual virginity within the East, which I go, it's not a very strong argument. It's a reasonable one. It's a rational one. The thing I like about it, if I was going to subscribe to the perpetual virginity, is that it's not an affront to the sacrament of marriage. And there's justification for why they wouldn't necessarily consummate that. But even just to my Western ears, I go, I'm not 100% on board with that. I tend to not hold to that dogma. I tend to say, okay, well, that's a better explanation for the perpetual virginity. I'm not 100% there. Now, in part, it's because I don't care enough to have devoted enough time to become an expert on it to be convinced one way or the other. And so that's kind of my take on it. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, Evie, is it does talk about the brothers of Jesus. And there's an argument where that is genetic brothers. It's an argument where it's more like
stepbrothers.
Like stepbrothers. There's an argument where it's like brothers that are, Jewish, cousins. And again, I'm not an expert on it one way or the other. I really don't care enough to become an expert on it. If I was going to convert to Orthodoxy, I probably still wouldn't care enough to become an expert on it because it's not something that I think has any salvific impact. Maybe one day I might get bored and spend a month researching it or something. But my main concern with the perpetual virginity is really what Rome's view does to the sacrament of marriage, not necessarily the East's view on their explanation for it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just kind of where I land on it. Oh no, Mind Trap, your phone's dying. Plug it in. Stay with us. Stay with us.
It is interesting that we really come to this completely different paradigms. I feel like you are very much more, and not that I don't care as much, you're very much more trying to get theology in line, trying to make sure that makes more sense. And not that I discount theology. It's more, I think I'm more concerned with right living and what that actually looks like in a body of believers. Mm-hmm. So orthopraxy instead of orthodoxy, which I don't think you can have one without the other completely. But I think that it's more of like, there's so many trees. I mean, especially in Protestantism, you have over 40,000 denominations, not including Catholic and the 3 or 4 different Eastern branches that are out there. And so you kind of have to judge more of the trees by the fruit. And so it's, okay, what are the churches actually doing to respond to kind of the waves of
hold on, I'm gonna have to ban RG because he just said I look old enough that you're my son.
Nice.
Okay. Oh, that's my least favorite person that's ever lived right now. You've just surpassed Matt Slick and James White, RG. That's cruel. That's cruel. You're about to see tears roll down my cheek like that alien, or not the alien. I'm gonna stop talking because that's gonna offend people. I'm gonna stop. But thank you for the kind comment there, RG. No, but I think you're right. I think you touched on something where that's orthopraxy. Mm-hmm. And I think the Western mindset is generally consent to a set of propositions
yep.
with no transformed life or commitment. It's dead knowledge. It's not transformative. It's not renewing your mind. It's not affecting the way that you live largely. No, I know you're kidding. I know you're kidding. I'm kidding too. I'm not kidding. I hate you. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Jamie, see what you started? See what you started, RG? Like, you don't understand how quickly it is to get a mutiny on my channel.
There's nothing wrong with getting older.
There's not. No, it's beauty. It's wisdom and it's beauty. 9 years right now, I think, between us. But yeah, I think you have to have.
I think that's why I like the East so much, is that it's more about the right action, which will lead to the right belief system and the right theology. Is that's kind of the horse is leading the cart. And so much so, as you said, is that the West has, you got to figure out this cart. You got to make sure it's correct. And even though we start off with like the whole ABC of Protestantism, admit, believe, and confess, it stops being an action.
Well, I'm going to follow up here. I see Kingdom in Context. So originally he had given us a super chat.
Yep.
And thank you again for that. He says, help me reconcile Orthodox canons that contradict the apostles' teaching and even teachings from Polycarp and Irenaeus. And then he follows that up with the canon decreed at Nicaea concerning the Passover. They changed the practice of how believers practice the Passover and unleavened bread. Gosh, you're getting into the weeds here. Okay, Sean, as I understand it, I don't. So you're asking me to be an expert or comment on something I need to look into. I think that the East continues to use leavened bread because that's the term that was used when Christ broke bread with his apostles. The West uses unleavened bread.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard, and again, there's a big asterisk next to this that you need to research it, but I've heard that the reason that the West uses unleavened bread was that it comported, it traveled better, that it took up less space, and it had to do more with the way that they would basically have it, its shelf life. And then it also will come down to whether or not you're viewing in this context leaven as sin or leaven as life. So in the Bible, leaven is often described as sin. A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. But leaven also causes the bread to rise. And Christ said, "This is my body," and it was a risen body. So I think what you end up with there is a non-essential disagreement over whether or not you should use leavened or unleavened bread. When my son was baptized, we had both. We also had wine and we had grape juice. It had more to do with the convictions of the one that was participating more than it did to do with the actual elements. Now we did that at home.
So he did follow up as well. Basically, that's just an example. So his thing is really, he believes that the Orthodox would say that the church has the authority, and they would actually, from my understanding of it, and again, this is coming from someone who's more of a Protestant background. They have the understanding that can only happen when there's a bunch of bishops together in an ecumenical council, which hasn't happened. I think the last one was around 800-ish AD. But they get together, the bishops and the Holy Spirit, they say, get together and decide Christian doctrine or whatever they're trying to battle, whatever heresy or trying to justify in that council.
I don't think that they would say they're changing a teaching of an apostle.
No,
but there may be disagreement with another church father.
Right.
It's not like one church father has what is the term? The monopoly on truth, I mean, there was one church father that was appealing to the phoenix and thought it was a real creature. So they're not free of error. And what the councils of the early church would do, they would get together and they would work through this and try and reach an agreement among all of them. And there's a good argument to be made that there was some error that occurred along the way, but I think generally that's a good practice, is to get all the churches together and have them talk through it and work through it.
And I think, I think every denomination would say that they can change practice. I mean, Roman liturgy, I think, is somewhere around 300 AD as well. And of course, Protestantism changes probably every 10 years.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't see how they wouldn't change at least practice of it. Now, doctrine, they're probably just clarifying.
And I think maybe you're referring to the move from a Saturday to a Sunday. Maybe is that what you're talking about, Sean? I'm not sure. The Phoenix was a real creature. How dare you? Yeah. But no, I think you're right. I think that Rome and her Protestant children, we tend to have more of a propositional or assent to proposition mindset, and it's like I've got to get the knowledge in order, before I can feel like I'm there. And I think in the East it's a little bit more relational, it's more experiential, and then that follows. The best example I could give is my son wants to know me. He just comes in the room and spends time with me. Mm-hmm. That knowledge will come about over time. It's not that the knowledge isn't important, but if you have the knowledge and you don't have the relationship, it doesn't really do you any good. Mm-hmm. So the first and most important thing is that connection, that relationship with God. But I think in the West we tend to view things more analytically. We try to quantify and identify and put a toe tag on everything, and I think ultimately it ends up missing out on a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Man, we're getting into the weeds here.
I know. And okay, Sean's got some.
Sean, what's Sean's background?
I don't know. He's a gentleman on the internet that I've interacted with a few times. He's got a bigger channel than me, so I got to be nice to him.
I just would like to know his background.
He's got some really out there views.
Same here.
And it's cool that we're able to have civil conversations, and I like that about Sean. And so we get along well despite having out there views that differ from one another.
He was raised evangelical Protestant. May God have mercy on us all. He was raised confused. Awesome.
Yeah, no, he's got some interesting views. I like him. So does Jamie. Thank you, Jamie.
He's like trying to put them into context as out there views. That actually is a perfect example of more of a structuralist approach that we just talked about. And there's nothing wrong with that, because we all deal with structuralism and post-structuralism, is that he is trying to come to a complete understanding of kind of where everything lays in the theology world, which is great. But at the same time, I think it goes back to what drives the cart is the horse and the right living. And so that's where, okay, what are the right practices that an early Christian should have held? And maybe he's getting to that point, which is a great point. And maybe there's things we can learn from him that are like, hey, I don't even know what it's called, but I think it's like the 9-hour prayers that I've actually been trying to follow a little bit with the Orthodox, when they pray at different hours, or it's the first prayer they do in the morning when they wake up, or the last thing they do at night before they go to sleep, which is just really cool to get in a sort of rhythm. But what is this?
Jordan was just telling Kingdom in Context. He said that we likely mean his conclusions are less common, not necessarily his methods. Yeah, I can't speak to his methods. I was just talking about some of his beliefs, particularly Christ's role as a high priest. It's out there, Sean. You know it's out there. Like,
so
come on.
Danielle Tracy Ann just said the church has been given the authority to bind and loose. So this is another thing where the East and the West dramatically different, and West is in Protestantism, and the Catholic have a different idea of it. So where does church authority lie? Does it lie with apostolic succession, or is it completely flat? We all can go start a church tomorrow and say we've finally got it right, and we're not Joseph Smith, but we're really close.
Yeah. There's some concern there. There's some concern there, and I don't think apostolic succession is free of any sort of problem or criticism, but it seems to be the safer route. I'll just say,
and that's what all the early church fathers were talking about, is the fact that, hey, your priest or presbyter or whatever you want to call it, the bishop, was the authority here on earth, and that you should respect him, regard him as though you're talking to Jesus. And no, he doesn't have that full authority, but pretty darn close. And you can't really kick him out or fire him, which wouldn't really set well with Protestantism, which is always great whenever you're in a evangelical Protestant church and they're encouraging you not to leave the church based upon theological differences. You're like, well, where did we get our start here?
It's so fascinating. You're sitting in a church and they're saying, hey, just because you disagree doesn't mean you should get up and leave. And you're like, you guys, do you not know what Protestant means?
Maybe instead you write a pamphlet and nail it to their door. That's the right way.
That's right. Oh man, it's funny because like I enjoy like good high church. I enjoy divine liturgy of the East. I think it's very reverent. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. I have no problem with the incense. I've explained to the audience. I have no issue with icons. That sort of stuff.
Join a church you agree with.
What's that?
Jamie, join a church you agree with.
Yeah,
that's scary. I don't know if I want to do that. And I think that actually goes back to like why I don't approach it as much theological, is just because like I went to a Christian high school for 2 years. I went to a Christian university for 4, and you would get into those theological discussions. And at the end of the day, it really felt like that people were just creating their own shadow to worship it, which got really scary. Like that if Christ and God and the Bible 100% agree with you, that's a dangerous position. That means you're probably not actually on the right path.
Yeah, it's scary. And on that note, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, I mean,
that's the idol you should kill. You should kill the idol that you're creating in your own image.
Yeah. It's funny. I went on Trinity Radio and they were like, what is idol killer? Is that just you're killing Calvinism? And I was like, no. I was like, it's anything that you elevate higher than God. It can be even your own view and understanding of God. And I even explained that on one of my discussions with the guys over at Trinity Radio. And they're like, Jonathan Pritchett was like, man, I really hate that you say that. That's too reasonable. He's like, I was hoping you were going to be like some zealot, like discernment ministry. And I was like, no, it's anything that you elevate above God, even in your effort to know him. If you're elevating something that's false above him sincerely, you need to be open to that and tear it down.
Mm-hmm.
Now
I here's upset KIC.
I didn't mean to upset you, Sean. I hope you understand. Like a lot of what I'm saying is in jest and all of that. I hope you can pick up on the tone. If you still believed in Calvinism, and I came along and said your views were out there, would you want me to address your arguments or just dismiss you as strange? No. You're asking me questions about some things that I'm not an expert on at this point, and so I've confessed that. And I don't see them as salvific and all that important to me. So, like I was mentioning with like even the perpetual virginity, it's not something that I have a whole lot of care about. Now, your views on the role of Christ as priest, and if I understand it correctly, and again, there's a big disclaimer here. I think you stated something to the effect that you believe Christ is going to be continually offering animals for sacrifice even after the return. There's some concerns that I have there. and we've talked about those. But I don't just dismiss you as strange. I think you're a nice guy who's got some strange ideas. But I don't just dismiss you based on that position. But you're asking me things that I can't speak to in detail here, so I hope you understand that. Now here's an interesting question.
Oh.
No. No. Now here's why. One, even though I affirm theosis, and I believe that when we see him, we'll be like him. We'll be transferred. When we see him, we'll see him as he is, for we'll be like him. I affirm theosis. I'm not entirely comfortable praying to a saint, especially given that the Father is omnipresent and omniscient and is aware of my thoughts before I speak them. So, no. And that might be more of a cultural bias. It might be something rooted in my Protestant upbringing.
It's also a completely different understanding of the church, and then a completely different understanding of time and space. Yeah. And I think we've talked about this a little bit, that the East, and I think the Catholics believe almost that all the saints are still alive and still actively working. And then there's not I think there's a deep sleep that someone will refer to, kind of more of the West, that we're waiting on Jesus to come back, and then everyone will be awoken and resurrected, and that really no one's in heaven with him or in paradise or anything like that. But a lot of times what they view in talking about the East and Catholicism is that those saints and Mary are actually interacting with Jesus right now, and that the body's still alive, and so that they're not actually separated from Christ, because they are part of the body of Christ. And it would be like asking your friend who's right next to you, who goes to the same church, hey, will you pray for me? I'm not feeling well. And so they view it very similar, and not as in a praying to God. It's more of, hey, Mary, will you pray on our behalf to Jesus that we need help with X? Just like you would do with a family or friend.
No, I understand that. But it's still this cultural sort of, you're like,
oh yeah, no. I feel the same way. I'm just like, I don't know if I can do that. That's cool. I don't have that understanding or confidence yet, but it's a completely different understanding.
I mean, the whole argument that Danielle is making is, it's like, we don't believe that they're dead.
No.
Scripture does talk about them sleeping. Says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And I think it's going to come down to your view on that, that intermediate state, if there is one, what that's going to look like. And then culturally, like what you're comfortable with. I mean, I've had moments, where our dad passed away on his birthday in 2021,
2020,
COVID
year,
COVID, 2020. And, there'll be moments where I go through something and I'll be like, man, Dad, I get it, or I wish you were here, but I don't really know if I'm talking to my dad. I don't think I'm praying to my dad, but I'm just like, but there's something that's kind of innate where sometimes I'll find myself just talking to Dad. And, I'm like, well, maybe that's kind of what they're doing. And maybe I'm just making it into something that it's not. Would I pray to Mary and the saints? I don't know. I would have to be comfortable with it and have good theological justification for it.
A part of it, I think, is also just a completely foreign understanding of the monarchy system as well, of why Mary is so elevated, as well as the fact that she was the Queen Mother, which was a bigger role in their monarchies than compared to, say, our first ladies or whatever. And so it's a completely different understanding of how the Queen Mother would actually operate, that she would almost be at the right hand of God. Hey, I'm just telling you, she would be at Jesus's right hand. So that's what the Queen Mother did in the kingdom of Israel. So
you're going to get me canceled, Brian.
I probably am. Sorry, guys.
No,
did you just drop 1,000 subscribers? Just kidding.
Oh man. But thank you for this super chat. I have no problem with Well, now here you go. This is a gentleman that I have a lot of respect for, and he says the Queen Mother is a pagan concept. So,
so is a monarchy. Like they got a monarchy because they were pagan and rejected God as their king.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I mean,
that's true.
That doesn't mean God didn't use David and Samuel. Like 100% agree that we shouldn't have kings or queens or presidents, but we got them because of our sin.
But do you think that role will transfer into the new kingdom?
I mean, that is a wild guess. I mean, and I think it's a Luke, the angel who speaks to her, speaks very very elevating compared to most of their interactions, from what I can tell. So it's like she's blessed among all women. Also think that she, and this is where it's going to get a little confusing, I feel like she is the perfect icon for what the ideal woman should be. And I think that gets lost a lot in Protestantism, is that the woman who has her child and gives it up to sacrifice to the world is the perfect example of what a mother has to do, is to raise their son or daughter to go out into the world, possibly being naked and embarrassed and put on a cross, but to have to bear that is the perfect example. And yeah, I mean, I feel like Jesus is still the perfect example for women, but I think they have a specific struggle in womanhood that we just don't have, and then mother. So
it's an interesting perspective. Idol Killer, I still love you, Warren. That'll never change. Just wish you would engage with me sometimes instead of squinting and moving on. Well, it's because you've got such an unusual position that I would need to dedicate one time to know what all the nuances of your position are so that I can steel man it. I don't want to straw man you. And then I would need to go and research the justification for your position such that I would know where we agree and where we disagree. And that's a really big commitment, I think, of anybody, particularly since you're in an area that I'm not focused on, and I don't have a whole lot of time to do that, Sean. So
is there 3 or 4 points that he could go over with you in a 30-minute streamed YouTube that y'all could go over, and then you go investigate those 3 or 4 points and then come back and say, hey, here's more questions or whatnot? Because that could be an interesting
if you want to hit me up on Facebook or Twitter and message me, Sean, and give me your top 3 positions, try and be as concise as you can, because I don't have a whole lot of time right now, brother. I'm under tremendous stress, and one day people will find out what I've been facing, and there'll be an icon made of me. But it's been rough. But send me your bullet points, and I'll try and engage you with as much as I can. I'll need to go and again look into what you're saying and research it so I can see where we agree and where we disagree. Let's see. So I'm not sure what that was. Oops. Yeah. So all right. So praying to Mary. You said you're totally fine with that. You don't have any issues with that. Yeah, I mean, there's some.
I didn't say that, but yeah,
I know, I'm joking.
I understand why they do. It's still foreign to me, where I'm just maybe one day I can get there and be like, hey, it's just like me asking you to pray for one of my kids who's sick or whatever. Maybe I can get there and understand it, but I'm not there yet. It's the same thing with the whole crossing yourself. Actually, I met a couple this past Wednesday, and they're the wife was like, you're the only one in here who doesn't cross themselves. And I'm like, well, I don't fully understand it yet, so I'm just not going to do it until I'm ready to. It's cool. I wish I understood why y'all do it. I think it's a reverence thing. I know. I'm it's cool that they do it. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different world is really what it is.
Completely different. Yeah. And that's part of it too, is you're trying to read. Anytime you're reading scripture, you're reading Greek cultures, Hebrew cultures, Jewish cultures, all of that, and trying to understand context that it's just completely foreign to us. And that's where we need some sort of tradition. of understanding what is actually happening there to kind of to enlighten us, because it's completely different. It's not suburbia in America.
Yeah, and some of my concerns with just wherever I land has been their anthropology, it's been their doctrine of God, and it's been the impact of Platonism on that. Are they using Platonism in a beneficent way to where it gives us a utility and tools and terms to talk about these things, or is it elevating it to such a degree that it is completely dismissing and subjugating God's self-revelation in Scripture to the point of irrelevance because they've so elevated the Platonic, omnis and ims, and so that's a concern that I have. One of the things that I've been, I guess, relieved, I guess would be a good word, or encouraged, is that the East is, depending on what East you're talking to, is not Augustinian. Like, they recognize the errors of Augustine, they recognize the problems of original sin, Augustinian original sin. They're going to affirm something more like ancestral sin. It's actually quite biblical. But then you'll have some in the East that are Latinized or Romanized, and they're going to assert, oh no, like because of this one statement, at Nicaea or some other council, they've retroactively made Carthage a ecumenical council, and thus Augustinian anthropology is orthodoxy, and they'll make some really wild claims and trying to put that Augustinian antichrist anthropology in place. And I'd die outside the church before I ever accept an Augustinian anthropology, because I just see it as entirely antichrist. But like I said, some of the people that I've talked to within Orthodoxy are like, no, we agree with you on this. It's the Latinized, the Westernized guys that are wrong here. And then the other concern that I have is they're Greek, Hellenized, Athens. There's some concerns I have there about the impact of Platonic metaphysics on their view of God. And one of the things that's been interesting is as I've talked to several Orthodox priests and scholars, they've noted, well, no, like, because the essence and energy distinction, dynamic omniscience, just that's orthodoxy. And I was like, really? You're not going to call me a heretic and kick me out of the kingdom? And they're like, no, that's God is living. That's in his energies. His essence, his nature is unchanging, but his energies are dynamic and ever changing. It's like, oh, okay, all right. So I am finding some I don't know what the term is, common ground or some shared foundational commitments there that are encouraging. Mm-hmm. Kingdom in Context, another 20. Man, thank you, Kingdom. You're supporting the channel tonight, brother. Appreciate it.
Serious.
Christ was prophesied to become high priest forever in heaven's temple in the Old Testament. Post-resurrection, Christ was made high priest forever in heaven's temple. The terms, definitions haven't changed and never will. Again,
so is the argument that the high priest only does animal sacrifice?
I'm not sure if that's his position or not. From what I've heard, it is. But again, I don't know if that's a straw man of his position and people have been misrepresenting it. I'm trying to be fair to Sean, and I think maybe he's seeing it as me being unnecessarily dismissive. But I'm actually trying to make sure I'm not straw manning.
That's where I think if y'all did a 30-minute just stream.
I don't know, man. This is an area that he spent a lot of time on.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you just listen to whatever he's saying. Like, okay, I'm going to go research if you're saying that he's supposed to be the high priest.
Now, I agree that he's the high priest, but the issue is right. that what does the high priest do? Well, he intercedes, between God and man.
Right.
And the reason that Christ is now high priest forever is because of the hypostatic union, where he has fully assumed the totality of human nature, grafting it to the divine without abuse, diminution, or addition to subtraction of one to the other, and therefore he is perfectly uniting God to man. So the incarnation is what led him to be our high priest, not animal sacrifices, but it was really him restoring humankind back to the image, the role of image bearer is the way I understand it. But Sean may disagree. I'm not sure what his view is there. But thank you, Sean. Oh, here's another one. Oh no, sorry, that was him commenting to somebody else. Yeah, 100%. Like if you see that come down, Fire King, just immediately ban him or like that. Zero tolerance for anti-Semitism or Nazi. Yeah, absolutely.
So what was the next thing he said? Okay. He said something else after that. Modern Christianity is changing definitions, which that's another issue, is that half the time we don't even know what we're talking about because no one's defining the terms.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know what your views are here, Sean. If you're arguing that he is eternally sacrificing animals, I don't see that as the necessary role of the high priest. The ultimate role of the high priest is to be intercession between God and man, and I think he's done that. That's why the veil was torn. But I don't want this episode to be all about Sean. See, here's another friend of mine. He's a. Are you a modalist? Oneness. I think you're oneness, right? Tattered Bible. I think you're oneness. But yeah, so it's interesting to see how when the Reformation comes about, there's this sharp. You know what? Here, hold on a second. Drex says, "Why are you so hard against Platonism when Platonic concepts are in Scripture?" When you have God saying that he thinks, that he searches, that he tests to know, that he observes, that he has wisdom, that he responds, that he interacts, that he's free to change, all of this is that he says he has temporal location. All of this is antithetical with Neoplatonism. It's antithetical. This is what led Tyler Vela to in part declared that the God of the Old Testament was a Hebraic megazeus, because he was such a Platonist, classical theist, that the God of the Old Testament was an offense and an affront to his Platonism. That isn't the only reason that he apostatized. There's going to be some more information on that coming out, I'm sure. But my concern is that Neoplatonism is a rejection of God's self-revelation in Scripture. So, it depends on what you're trying to say by concepts are in Scripture. We would have to nuance that and kind of work through that and see what you're referencing there.
Yeah, and I think he might be confusing Platonism with Neoplatonism. Some of the Plato Republics philosophical ideas, because Neoplatonists were not Christians. They just tried to adopt some of the Christian ideas on it when they first came about.
Yeah. We got another one here from Jose. One argument I hear for praying to saints and or Mary is comparing it to asking a living brother for prayer. Yeah, that's exactly what my brother Brian was saying a moment ago. Is it's like, well, if they're living, and you just go, hey, will you intercede? Will you pray for me? And when you understand the idea of theosis, that we're in the process of being transformed into the image and likeness of God, that when we see him, we'll see him as he is, for we'll be like him. There's this idea of what sometimes is called deification, where people object and they go, oh, you're saying you're going to be made God. Well, no, there's only one God, but we're going to be restored to his image and likeness, which was his entire purpose, as he stated in the beginning. And so a lot of people object to those instances in Scripture, and they go, well, it doesn't really mean that. But if it does mean what it says, and theosis is a biblical concept, and to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, then it doesn't really make, I don't see an issue with it. But culturally, it's still bizarre for me. I'm a Protestant. I was raised Calvinist. I mean, the idea of praying to a saint or Mary is bizarre. And even if, let me put it this way. My brother Brian sitting next to Jesus. And I go, Brian, will you pray for me? My Western mind goes, why? I'm going to go, hey, Jesus, if I can go to Brian, I can go to Jesus. So in my mindset, I struggle with that. I don't think it's a salvific issue, but it's just, I go,
I mean, their whole thing is the fact that if this saint is really close to God and is supposed to be a just man, because the prayers of a just man will make you well.
Availeth much, yeah.
Right. And so their whole thing is if that saint was known for that issue that you need, that their prayers are going to have more weight than yours, which, I mean, I don't understand fully that argument. So,
and Jordan points out, he says, Platonic ideas aren't in Scripture. The closest we see is a nod to the idea of forms in the book of Hebrews. Yeah, I mean, the incarnation, even when you get into the New Testament, the incarnation is really not possible with a strong commitment to Platonic metaphysics, because it entails, while there may not be a change in essence, the divine nature, there's a change relationally, temporally, there's logical priority, and none of that is, and there's temporal priority. None of that is compatible with those sorts of views.
Isn't there a play on word with the logos and some of Platonism?
What's that?
And there's a play on words with like in John 1 with some of the Platonism.
Yeah, I possibly. He's possibly using that. Platonism entered into Judaism. I think it was entered into Judaism. Was it around 100 or no, around 40? I think it was around 40 BC, if I'm not mistaken. I have to go back and check my dates, folks. But it entered into Judaism prior to the incarnation, and it started getting into Christianity as early as, I believe, the 2nd century. You start to see these like strong Platonist commitments. But the idea of Platonism was kind of like how they're viewing evolution today. That's just where science is. This is what we know to be true now. And so you see a lot of Christians now going, okay, well, old Earth, evolution, like we can create a apologetic that incorporates that and preserve Christianity. And you saw Christians doing the same thing with Platonism. We can preserve Christianity, we can preserve the God of the Old Testament, and we can create an apologetic that includes Platonism. The problem is that over time, Platonism, because it's such so contrary to the self-revelation, that it tramples the God of the Bible underfoot and doesn't leave anything left. And you're either left following the God of the philosophers or the God of the Old Testament. Yeah. And see, Craig here is pointing out there is no difference between Platonism and Neoplatonism. Periphery thought he was a Platonist. And I think the issue of Platonism and Neoplatonism has more to do with, I believe it would be more of like an age or a resurgence. I don't think there's much difference if there is. Yeah. And looking through here, want to make sure I'm not missing anything. All of a sudden, we just got lit up with comments here.
That's good.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Veritac.
Did you tell everyone I am above average midwit, so I can probably help with nothing? No. My brother said, he's like, well, you're gonna have to call me an above average midwit, and I said, well, you're just rubbing it in that you're raising the intellectual value of my channel. Yeah. Platonism is about is that perfect abstract forms or ideas that transcend the physical world. They're the true reality behind what we see in the material world. Well, in Platonism, you have the one and you have perfection. And so Plato's concept of the perfect God is one that is frozen and locked in a state of unchangingness, that he can't respond, he can't have relations, he can't have before and after relationships.
that he can't become related to human nature. He can't become creator. He can't become Lord. He can't become redeemer and savior, because any change is either moving closer to perfection or moving further away from it. And that's where you get these ideas of a timeless, absolutely immutable, absolutely impassible, I'll say, like a static omniscience, like all facts that will ever be are frozen and he knows them, and they will be because he's eternally known them. But he can't even be creator. So I think it's a much stronger claim than just saying that there's some form that transcends the material world. There's a spiritual world that transcends the material world. That's not going to get you Platonism. It's a much stronger commitment than that. But I appreciate the comment. Yeah, it's fun having my brother here. I enjoy these conversations. So, like, just so you guys know, this is probably going to be like how we hang out for Thanksgiving. It's going to be like I'm going to be saying, "Do you like the sweet potato souffle I made you, Brian? All right? Do you like the sweet potato?" And then I'll be eating the turkey. "Do you like my dressing? Was it too dry? Was it too moist?" And then we'll be talking about Platonism and Orthodoxy and church history and the problems of the Reformation. It's going to be fun.
I'm surprised no one's really brought up the icons. Usually icons are
with regard to Orthodoxy?
Yeah. And Catholicism.
Yep. I did a response recently. What was it? I think it was Gavin. I think Gavin did a video on icons. I don't think I did respond to that yet. Gavin Ortland, love that guy. He's a Calvinist. Can't stand his Calvinism, but man, do I like Gavin Ortland. And he did a video critiquing icons. I don't have a problem with icons. I mean, if you're going to put up a picture of Spider-Man or Michael Jordan or, I don't know, pick a celebrity, the athlete or something now, like what's wrong with putting up St. Peter or, Ignatius or Polycarp or, an early Christian martyr, like somebody that's going to be a role model that you can aspire to, that you see and you go, I respect this person and they're encouraging me on. I don't see an issue with icons.
I mean, they did have a whole council on it in 700s. Was it Nicaea 2?
Mm-hmm.
Where they said there was no problem as long as you're respecting him and not worshiping him.
Well, and the way it was explained to me was that the early church had icons dating back to the earliest days. Mm-hmm. Then there was a ban that came out against them. There was a big iconoclast movement. A lot of the icons were destroyed. Many were hidden, buried, stored away because they were revered. And then when Nicaea 2 came out, they dug up their icons, and there was a lot of icons just instantly there. And they're like, "Hey, where did these come from?" And they're like, "Oh, we
just made them.
Just made them.
They're fresh.
They're fresh." Yeah. At the end of the day, I don't see icons as salvific one way or the other. It's just you're not worshiping it. If you're actually worshiping it and you're revering it and you're elevating it above God, then I think you've got a major problem. But
which always brings up, like, the vast majority of evangelical Protestant churches will have a cross or a fish or some sort of icon for the church, of like, put it on the back of your car. So, like, why would that icon be okay to have and not a picture of, what is it? An angel destroying a dragon, which is always a cool photo.
Oh, yeah. Is that St. George?
St. George, and then sometimes, is it Michael, the archangel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was actually talking about St. George earlier today with somebody. What was that? Trying to remember. But yeah, I don't see an issue with the icons. Now, if you're worshiping something, then that's extremely problematic. But
and I think part of the difficulty is that sometimes, and especially I can't remember what the term is called, but it's like whenever blood pours from an icon or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? What's the term for that?
Say it again.
Whenever, like, if you have an icon that's supposed to look like Christ, blood will pour out from, like, where the nails were supposed to be. What is that? There's a specific term.
Well, if it's a human, it's a stigmata. That's I don't think
stigmata,
I don't
and
think
there's
there's I don't think
something
there's an
similar.
Eastern. Is there an Eastern? Are there any Eastern examples of stigmata? I think that's just purely Roman Catholic.
I have no idea, but something like that, or the fact that like an icon will become, maybe it's a weeping icons. I think that might be it. An icon might actually start being considered a holy place, and people will go travel to it, kind of like the pool called Beautiful, where the lame man would sit beside.
Yeah.
He would wait for the angel to stir it, but he never could until the apostles came by. I think that's the story. I think there is a separate understanding that places can become holy that typically is not held in the West.
Yeah, I mean, even in the Old Testament, it's like take off your shoes, you're standing on holy ground. I mean, there's certainly that idea within Scripture, but we're too enlightened, I think, in the West to tolerate such things. I think we have to stamp it out. I think there's something in us that wants to stamp that out.
Mm-hmm. How do you see the distinction between venerating and worshiping? Did you see that question for you?
No, I'm still scrolling. Oh, here's
Eternal Light asked it for you.
So how do you see the differentiation between veneration and worshiping?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a definitional distinction.
Yeah, venerating is respecting.
Yeah.
Or honoring.
Like I have my dad's Bible, right? Our dad's Bible. And I have in there his handwritten notes. Brian's not praying. He's just having a really bad internet connection. And I hope that's a bad internet connection and not on my end. But I have our dad's Bible, and so I have his notes in there. And so I have a high regard and a respect for that. I'm not worshiping it, but I have a high regard. I'm going to treat it with care, with respect. I'm going to honor that because not only is it the Word of God, but it has a connection to our dad. I'm not worshiping it, but I have a respect for it. I think icons I could view pretty much the same way. Hopefully Brian will come back and join us here in a minute. Yep, he just dropped out. Tell you, brothers, can't count on them. Hey, Mark, thank you so much for the super chat here. Someone less contentious than Dyer to talk about orthodoxy is Seraphim Hamilton. Huge wealth of knowledge, even has a 17-hour course arguing against Protestantism from Scripture. I like Seraphim. Really, really nice guy. I am concerned. I watched a video of his today, actually, on penal substitutionary atonement, and he made an argument that there is a Orthodox version. I don't think so. I think that's a mistake. But I like Seraphim, and I think you're right. I think he's a great resource. Let's see. Oh, hey, wait a minute. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. None other than Brian McGrew. He is back.
Sorry, I was trying to just pay respect to our Irish tradition of just Irish goodbying.
Now, we have an uncle who'll do that. We have an uncle who just, like, I'm not naming names. Don't name him out here, Norman. But what'll happen is he'll be over and you just turn around, he's gone. You're like, hey, where'd he go? So I guess we'll see him next family event.
Yep.
It's a family tradition. And I'm looking through here. Yeah, okay, so here's an interesting question. What about bowing down and that the grace of God flows through the icon? I have heard this stated where it's like, and again, you're talking to guys that aren't experts on Orthodoxy. I hope you understand that. But I have heard where they say that it's almost like a connection or what's the term? But I don't know how to. I don't know the term to use that without it sounding wrong.
Yeah, that's a Lord of Spirits podcast question for you.
Yeah,
call that number Ancient Faith Radio.
There you go. Yeah.
There
Like I
is
said,
a
I'm not Orthodox, but I have a lot of respect and love for them, and I find
Veritex
most of the
just
things that
outed you.
What's that?
Veritex just outed you.
Where is Veritex?
He just let you know where your family tradition's from.
Is that where he says venerating?
No, he just said it a couple minutes ago where he said West Virginia for you.
Whoa. Okay. Now this is getting a little interesting. I just realized, Warren, there used to be a famous political family in West Virginia. Former Attorney General was named Warren McGraw, one letter off. Now, here's the thing, too. There's also a buckwheat festival up in Georgia, and my ancestors are... What did I say?
You said Georgia.
Did I say Georgia?
Yeah.
Did I say West Virginia?
No.
No, sorry, I misspoke. There's a famous buckwheat festival up in West Virginia where one of our ancestors played a significant role in, I think, helping save the town during a war or something, and it's like a commemorated thing. So they have an annual buckwheat festival. They make buckwheat pancakes. I've never been, but I've heard it's...
No, he went to the convention in Virginia during right before the Civil War, and he was one of, I think it's like 20 something guys that voted to stay with the Union, the North. And so they voted to separate and become West Virginia. And on the way back, they were going to be ambushed and killed so that they could remain with Virginia. But they were warned and ended up going around that ambush. Took a little bit longer to get home. And then he eventually was I think a congressman and a banker. So there's even a house still there in that city. I can't remember the city name.
Yeah, so there's an iconoclastic argument that says you shall not make yourself any graven image, and shall not bow down and worship them. I think the emphasis here is not on the image. I don't think it's necessarily on bowing down, but I think it has to do with the worship. It's a graven image. I don't think the issue is of making crosses and going up to the stage and bowing down and praying before the cross. I can't tell you how many SBC churches I've seen do that. You get up here and get right. Get up. Come on. If you feel the Lord leading you, come on, get up here and come. We got people that are going to pray with you. Come up here, and they all get at the stage and they bow down and they're praying at the stage. I don't think that's what that passage is about. I don't think it's about the podium and praying in front of the podium or praying before the cross. I don't think it's necessarily about some sort of Byzantine art picture of the apostle, Peter. I think it has to do with worship. But I understand the iconoclastic argument. I understand that. Now look at you. Here you go. Yep. All right. Are you an expert on West Virginia history, or what's going on here?
Next podcast, West Virginia history and where it went right.
Look at this guy. Look at this.
Yeah.
Are you Googling? Wow. What are you doing? How do you know all that? That's
it is Kingwood. Yeah, there's still a McGrew house there. I think it's a museum now. Yep.
That is wild.
And there's I think we did a study, and there's 5 different families that are McGrews that are all across the United States, and we're not related to any of them. So
yeah. So back in the day, in the 90s, our dad hired a genealogist who did research, and he traced us to 2 different McGrew brothers that came over, and we were descendants of one. And then in the early 2000s, our mom called me and said, Warren, you got to go to the Pocket Sandwich Theater. I think it was in Dallas, Texas. And she's like, there's a lady there named Erin McGrew, and you got to go up there and see her. And she's doing a play at the Pocket Sandwich Theater. It's like a community play. And I was like, what are you doing, Mom? Like, this is weird.
She's probably not up still. It's okay.
What's that?
I said, she's probably not up anymore. You're okay.
Yeah. It's like, what are you doing? Pocket Sandwich Theater. And she's like, no, you got to go. I told her you were coming. We may be relatives. And I was like, all right. So myself and my friend Carson, we went up to the Pocket Sandwich Theater. We watched her put on some play, and you could eat food while that's happening. And then when it was over, she came up and introduced. Yeah, and she introduced me to her grandfather. And he said, "Oh," he said, "well, I just finished my book on the genealogy of the McGrews." He said, "I discovered that we're the descendant of one of these two brothers." Well, he had mapped it out from them through the other brother. So I'd bought a copy of his book and gave it to Dad. So we actually had the genealogy of two branches of the brothers. And then I think he even went even further back than Dad's genealogist did in the 90s. And I don't know what happened to that, but it was fascinating to read up on it. Yeah. And if you guys, if you would lift up me and my family in prayer, and if you feel comfortable doing it, your support financially is greatly appreciated. We're going through a pretty rough time right now, so you can learn more about it if you click on that link. But if you don't feel comfortable supporting some guy on the internet, then just consider praying for me and my kids. It's definitely appreciated, and God is living and active, and I don't think you need to pray to an icon for him to hear it. But if you got icons and you want to pray through those two, I'm not going to say no. Now, the subject of relics is an interesting one, because a relic is a remnant of a human body. It's like a bone or something generally, and that is trippy. I don't understand that at all.
What about the times where like saints die and their body doesn't age? That one's weird. Have you seen those?
Yeah. Sometimes
like a glass case or something.
Yeah, I've seen that. Like even the Roman Catholic, was it Father Padeo?
Yeah, Padre Pio.
Padre Pio.
Yeah,
that's it. I know a Roman Catholic owner of a pizzeria in Puerto Rico, and he was trying to get me to come out and take me on a tour and give me some great New York style pizzeria out there. And he sent me a book on Father. What is it? Pio?
Padre Pio.
Padre Pio. Mm-hmm. He was saying
There's
that
actually a movie that in the last couple of years that came out. Shia LaBeouf, I think, was in it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a skeptic, but at the same time, here's my thoughts. Here's what I affirm.
There's also a Eucharist that turned to blood.
What?
Sorry, I was reading a comment.
Okay, that's wild. Here's what I affirm. God became man, walked on water, healed the sick, raised the dead, gave sight to the blind, attached an ear after it was cut off, died, rose again. And so you go, okay, well,
bodily rose. Yep.
Bodily rose. I have, admittedly, some out there views. The core beliefs of Christianity are kind of out there. They're supernatural, that by definition. And so, along with that, you go, well, I don't want to just accept anything that seems out there. I mean, I have to maintain some degree of skepticism, but knowing that I hold some out there views, I have to say, okay, well, is there historical reason to believe this? Is there a good biblical reason to believe this? And if I can't, disprove it, then I'm going to say it's possible. It's possible. But at the same time, I don't stake, my eternal salvation on something that is possible.
I think that was Danielle Tracy.
Now, whole Morgantown.
What?
You know where Brewston Mills is? Then I would almost guarantee you know where Brewston Mills is.
You've probably driven through it if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, you know where Cooper's Rock is.
Yeah,
Veritax. You know where Cooper's Rock is. That's wild. That's where our father. He's got a grave up in that area. Beautiful country. That's wild. Here you go. West Virginia expert is in the chat tonight. That's awesome.
They don't get enough love up there. No. It's probably because they don't see the sun.
Listen, you're earning that golden horseshoe right now, Veritax. You've earned it. Honorary golden horseshoe winner right now. Questions about the rosary? I don't know. My understanding is that it's instructions on like helping you in your memorization of prayer. If it becomes vain repetition, I think that there's a major problem there. I think sometimes you can take it something that has a good application, like we're going to teach you how to pray,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then we turn it into an institutionalized thing that just becomes like vain repetition. It kind of loses its heart, and I think that's the danger of any tradition. So, you know, that's a concern that I have. Okay, now hold on. We got some more West Virginia history coming up here. I grew up in Mineral County, not far from the county seat of Hampshire County, Romney, which changed hands 56 or more times during the Civil War. Oh, that's cool. I seem to recall a story about handkerchiefs from Peter or the apostles being taken to the sick people. I think that was Joel Osteen. Was it? No, that was Benny Hinn. I think Benny Hinn.
No, that's a story in Acts. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I'm being silly.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going through here, looking in the chat. It's really fun to engage people in the side chat. I don't know if that's the first exit or not. I lived up there when I was in 4th grade. When our parents were going through a divorce, I attended 4th grade there. You were just a baby. Like you probably don't have hardly any memories. Yeah.
Mm.
But we would go up to Cooper's Rock on the weekends because it was free. Mom would pack a picnic and we would go up there and play on the limestone rocks and run around on the trails and stuff. And it was awesome. I loved it. I thought of myself as like Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, my side of the mountain, you know, where the red fern grows, lived all that up. Now, this is interesting. The Catholic Church uses secular scientists for every miracle, and even before things like exorcisms, people need to be seen by psychiatrists. Yeah, I'm not sure.
So she mentioned that there was a Eucharist that was bleeding and was continuing to bleed. Would they still take communion from that, or whatever they called the Eucharist?
I wouldn't want to participate.
I wouldn't either. I think it would be salty if it was real blood, right?
No, I would have serious concerns about that.
But then, I mean, like, would they?
We're warned against actual cannibalism,
right?
And if the thing is bleeding, we're told not to, you know, to consume the blood. So I think there would be some concerns there.
Apparently they don't partake.
Okay. I'm looking through here right now. Well, Brian, help me fill some dead air here while I look through the chat. Give us something else to talk about.
Oh man. Let's see.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong, Taters. My favorite preacher is Benny Hill. Do you ever watch that on PBS? Channel 13 in Dallas, Texas, when I was a kid. He'd always chase the girls around and that music would play.
Where do you feel like evangelical Protestantism is going right? Let's make it positive.
Ooh, that's going to be such a divergence from what my normal approach is.
I want to make it positive. What are they doing right? They found a use for all those shopping centers.
That's true. That's true. They're keeping the fog machine industry in business.
Oh.
Yeah. They're providing work to unemployed secular artists.
There's less baristas because of it.
That's true. That's true.
I'm kidding. No, there is stuff being done. There are people who are hearing the gospel and
Certainly.
coming to know the Lord. And there is some good stuff being done there. I think you are starting to see some sort of awakening happen in the last couple of years. I think you're seeing anyone who's somewhat close to free childcare for 2 hours on Sunday. Man, 2 hours. Are you Pentecostal?
He's going to adult Bible study and the main service. This guy's hardcore right here.
I thought it was a drive-through. No, I think there is any of the churches that have held somewhat truth to the gospel have seen people come to know the Lord and a growth in numbers. Positivity, not around here.
Not around here, brother. No, I think you're right. I mean, I think you're hearing Christ proclaimed, even if it's kind of a watered down, Americanized gospel. You're still hearing Christ proclaimed. And it's like the scripture says, whether they're preaching Christ for their own gain or out of their own sincerity, I celebrate because Christ is being proclaimed. And I don't think all of evangelicalism is like what we see with the mega churches and the guys flying around on wires and driving Teslas out and having like male strippers perform on the stage and stuff. Like these are all.
I thought you told me you weren't going to go to that church anymore.
I made too much in tips. It was hard for me to. But yeah, hey, you went there, man. You bring out the worst in me, Brian. That's why I don't bring you on the show more often.
That's a younger brother for you.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, I think I think you're still seeing Christ proclaimed, and I think that's a good thing. And I don't think they're all like that. I think they all have a slippery slope. They all have a tendency towards. The thing that I'm seeing in the larger evangelical movement is that its leaders, that its teachers, that its preachers have a tradition and a belief set that's not well defined or researched, but it's something that they just picked up and inherited.
Yep.
And so they're largely not able to defend or articulate it. And so when you challenge them on a particular view, not even challenge, you just go, why do we do this? Like, what's up with that? They generally don't know. It's a lack of familiarity with the original sources, and there's just a lot of
that's
concern.
part of it is also the time and age we live in. I mean, the vast majority of people, when they go to school, don't actually get specific knowledge. They just get general knowledge. And it's the same true for any theological seminary. Just give them general knowledge. They're not reading original sources. They're not going through the legwork of trying to do that stuff. That might be a doctorate if you're lucky.
Yep. And Veritax, you are spot on with this. Absolutely spot on. Yep. Don't you agree, Brian?
I haven't heard you sing in a while. Can you refresh my memory?
Sure. Thanksgiving.
Okay.
I don't want to get demonetized. They won't be able to tell me apart from John Denver. They'll just think it's actually him singing.
So Adriano said evangelicals need to read the church fathers. So that's actually really funny because I asked everyone in our senior leadership at our church if anybody has read them, and they all said no.
Yeah. Yep.
Was there a question there? And I said, no. Why would I have a question about something you haven't read?
Yeah.
So,
but they'll read Piper, Sproul, Washer.
Yeah. Or they'll I'm trying to remember who the guy, is it John Comer out in Northwest Washington, Oregon or something they're a big fan of? Who they're like, well, he reads the early church fathers and tells me what to think. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's a major problem.
Yeah.
It seems like many of the preachers are no longer theologians and scholars, but they're what's the term?
Evangelists.
No, not even so much evangelists, but it's more. Yes, there are some that are evangelists, but a lot of them are still turning into like motivational speakers.
Oh yeah,
you're getting a lot of that now, where you go in and you'll hear maybe a one verse or two verses out of the Bible, and then it's 45 minutes about the local football team and about some trial that they had when they were in college, and then a funny joke that they heard, and then some sort of life lesson and application, which is completely different because when you go to an Orthodox liturgy, that's a completely different approach. Completely different approach. It's like stepping back in time.
I love that great litany prayer that they do at the beginning.
I like the incense, man. I want to get that for the house.
You can
mask the dog smell. I've got a Boston Terrier. I got a pug that just reeks. Can't keep him clean enough. Yeah. Well, my brother, I promised you 2 hours. I think we've nearly hit it. Any parting words? Anything you want to say before we draw this down to a conclusion?
No. Just say continue to seek the Lord, and hopefully He's with us all, guiding us to ever be more like Him, and be part of the community of believers and body of believers wherever you are, as much as you can be, and continue to encourage them to seek the Lord and seek their history and knowledge, because I think that's missed in a lot of American societies. We just don't know our history, and that's me included. So,
yeah, I mean, you don't know where to even look in many cases. You go, well,
No.
what am I supposed to go and research?
Which you might want to plug that early church fathers, the Ante-Nicene, Nicene, and Post-Nicene book. It's on Amazon that you can get for your Kindle. You can download the Kindle to your computer, your phone. It's $2.99. If you do a delayed shipping off of Amazon, I think they give you $2 or $3. So most of you will have Amazon, and you can actually buy it and read it for yourself. And I mean,
what I'll do is I'll get an affiliate link, and I'll put that in the video description below. So if anybody's interested in picking this up, you can use the link below, and I'll get like 3 cents off your purchase or whatever. Helps the channel.
Yep.
But this is the complete Ante-Nicene and Nicene and Post-Nicene Church Father collection. Now you can buy the book in printed form, and it's the complete volume is. I mean, gosh, I mean, I think the last time I looked at these, it was like several $1,000s, but you can get it on Kindle for $2.99. So I'll put that on here and encourage everybody to go pick up a copy.
I'm now at the Epistle of Barnabas, which I'm not even familiar with. I've read Polycarp, St. Clement of Rome, Ignatius, a couple other ones, but it's been very interesting. And it's really cool because a lot of them will just quote scripture, and it's pretty interesting. They have a completely different viewpoint than a lot of Protestants understanding.
So you're asking, where is it in book form? It's actually in book form. It's several volumes. So it would be.
It's 1,000 books, and so you probably, I think, can get it in I think the smallest I found was like 12 or 13, and you're talking hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
Which
the ones I saw were, they broke them out. Like it was the Ante-Nicene, the Nicene, and the Post-Nicene. Those were all grouped together. So it'd be like a volume of books like this thick, and boom, that's one set. And then here's another set, and then here's another set. And I'm
at 1%, and I've been reading it for like a month.
Yeah. So I would get the PDF if you can, or the Kindle version, and you can do keyword searches too, so it helps you on if you're trying to do a topical study.
Yep. Hopefully everyone has a great Thanksgiving, and the original Thanksgiving is actually the Eucharist, so maybe everyone can do communion for it. So.
Yep. Well, brother, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks
appreciate
for having
it.
me.
Enjoyed our conversation. Everyone, thanks for tuning in.
Yep.
And I hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving. And until next time, we'll catch you guys later.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
The only way to get there was to float through the terrifying void between us.